we're going to talk about visa interviews today. So I have a lot of questions that you all sent in. Like, it's literally a whole 2 pages long. I'm very comfy because I'm going to be talking for a hot minute about visas, specifically the US visa interview. That's the one that a lot of people actually ask questions about. And so I am going to be talking about that this afternoon. Okay, so please feel free to join the conversation. I mean, it's just join. Whether you want to comment or request to come with me and, have a chat, like, we're all talking. So don't just watch. Feel free to chime in, ask for clarification, add to it if you have any personal experience, if there's anything you heard. Hey, we're all learning here. I'm going to do my best to answer the questions that I have gotten on our Instagram page and hopefully our YouTube page soon. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and dive in. Let us talk about US visas. My first question is, what should I do to help me qualify for the US visa? That's a loaded question. And so first of all, if you're applying for a US visa, and I'm assuming this person asked about student visas, the first thing you will have to do is to have a valid admission. Yeah, so you have to be admitted into a school in the US that has the right to provide I-20. And I-20 is essentially your immigration documents that you're going to take to the embassy. It's also what couches your status, your immigration status in the United States. So it's a very important document. A lot of schools can give this to you, but not all schools are approved to give you an I-20. So just getting an admission does not guarantee that you can just walk into the embassy and get a visa. The school has to issue you an I-20. As a matter of fact, when you're completing the online application for your US visa, you would have to put your service number, right? Your service number is the number on your I-20 that tells the US visa, the US consulate, I said the US visa, the US consulate that yes, you have indeed gotten an admission into a school in the US. Sorry, I have to adjust my camera here. And it also creates a record for you. Like, your service record ends up being what is used to track you as a student once you're in the United States. So the first thing is a bona fide admission. The second thing is funding. Now, whether you have scholarships or whether you're being funded by, parents, guardians, relatives, your funding situation has to be solid. And I'm going to talk more about that in the next few points. But when you're going to the embassy, you have to have a solid funding story. Who is paying for this? If you have a scholarship, does it fully cover your tuition and your cost of living? If there's a balance, where is that balance coming from? And the person or the entity that's going to pay the balance, can they afford it? They will ask you questions, right? And so the consular officer may ask you a question like, okay, what does your mom do? Or what does your dad do? Or what does your uncle do? And that is to gauge whether realistically that person can afford $30,000 or $20,000 or $50,000 as the case may be. So it cannot be bogus. Your funding has to be solid. The third thing is your ties to your home country. You have to show that you are stable in your own country or in your home country, and you do have ties to this country, so that as you're going to the US or wherever it is you're going to, they're not worried about your stability where you're coming from or your likelihood of illegally immigrating into the country. And so your proof of strong ties has to be solid. It could be evidenced by, if you're applying for a graduate degree, for example, are you working currently? Do you have a good job? What are you actively doing in the country? And so you don't want to fill out the visa application and not have any ongoing job experience. Even if you don't have a paid job experience, go get an internship or volunteer somewhere, but you have to show that you are stable in your home country and that there are plausible reasons for you to come back after you're done with school, right? Whether it's to come back and work, or whether you can articulate clearly that what you're going to study, you have thought through how it will be useful in your home country, right? And so 3 major things. Let's recap. It's what qualifies you for a US visa. First is a bona fide admission, right? You are actually admitted to a school. They have issued you an I-20. That's number 1. Number 2, your funding story has to be solid. who is funding your education, how will it be funded, if there's a balance, where's the balance coming from. Very important things. And your third thing to keep in mind is your proof of strong ties, or your strong ties to your home country, right? They may not ask you explicitly, but they are listening in your responses to see whether you do have a stable living condition in your home country, or whether you're just trying to run away. And believe me when I say that they have heard it all. And so you want to make sure that you are indeed presenting yourself as a candidate who has strong ties to their home country. So yes, those are the three main things that would help you qualify for a US visa. All right, next question. If you have any clarifying questions, please throw that in. I'll be happy to answer them. So the next question: when is the best time to apply for visa, and what do I need to know to pass my F1 visa interview? So I kind of touched on the three main things you need to have at first. I'll talk about visa interview tips in a bit, but let me address the best time to apply. So you cannot apply for a US visa more than 90 days before the start date of your program. The start date of your program is usually on your I-20, right? And so you have to go to the embassy within that window. So for example, if your admission to school, if school starts in August, you're looking at going to the embassy sometime around May, right, versus January. And so there is a window with which you'll be allowed to go to the embassy, and it's sometime between 90 days before the start of your program start date. It doesn't mean you cannot apply for visa a year or 6 months before, but when you're picking your interview date, make sure you're getting something that fits that window if you have the option. Now, I have been seeing and hearing some crazy stories where like a lot of students are having to apply for emergency appointment to be able to attend, a US visa interview. At least of, the past few months, the pandemic really threw everything out of whack. So if that's the case, the embassy would issue you a date or give you a date that fits that criteria. And so that's the best time to apply for visa. Apply as soon as you can, right? So not to confuse you, apply as soon as you can. Get in the system, start being able to look at the dates. But when you're picking a date, make sure you pick one that falls closer to when, or at least 90 days, 3 months-ish before your start date. So what do I need to know to pass my visa interview? I've talked about a few things. So let's talk about interviewing tips, right? A lot of people make this mistake. And that is, all the garbage in, garbage out information that you see on the internet, where you're just, you are reciting what people told you, right? You are, spitting out it's the top, engineering program in the country with a strong alumni group, with a strong African International Student Association. Very generic things about what, like, the questions that you're giving, very generic answers, right? Whether it's about why you're going to study there or what you want to do there, there isn't an actual direct connection to you as a student. Mistake number one. So take this from me. You heard it here, or maybe you have heard it somewhere else, but this is a very important point. So get your pen and paper or your phones and write this down. It is an interview for you, or for the consular officer to get to know who you are as a student and what you're going to accomplish. Your answers have to be about you mainly, right? What are you passionate about? What are your dreams? What is this degree going to help you accomplish? Why did you choose that school in relation to what you are passionate about or what you hope to accomplish in the future? Like, you are the central focus of that interview, right? And so I get the whole, really preparing and memorizing, answers or memorizing, responses. But if you can't tie it back to who you are as a person, right? You are essentially telling the consular officer that you Googled this thing, you crammed responses on the internet, and you're just reciting those responses back to them. That's exactly what you're doing. Keep in mind, whatever you say during that 5 to 7 minutes, it's a very short interview. You're giving the consular officer an opportunity to know who you are as a student and an opportunity to give you the visa to go study. And so your responses have to show who you are and not just be generic responses. Of course, you have to answer the question. So if they say, for example, why do you want to go to, let's pick a random school. Why do you want to go to University of Iowa, right? University of Iowa has XYZ program that is connected to this course or this problem or this thing that I am passionate about, that I want to do or I want to go study, right? University of Iowa's program meets the specification that I am looking for what I want to accomplish as a student or in my career. You are the central focus. Why are you going to get a bachelor's degree? Why are you going to get a master's degree? I am passionate about this, or I'm interested in doing this, or I am really excited, like I want to do this, and so therefore I would like to go get a master's degree in XYZ to help me do XYZ when I return home, right? You are the central focus, right? So that's an important thing you need to know to pass your F1 visa interview. The second thing is the way you communicate, right? And so talking, expressing yourself and communication, that's something that like a lot of us are not intentional about until it is time for us to bring that skill and put it on the table, right? i.e. job interviews, school interviews, visa interviews, right? But communication is a skill that you hone over time, right? The way you articulate yourself, the way you connect, being careful not to go off on a tangent when you're talking, right? If they ask you a question, you want to, in 90 minutes or less, articulate yourself and answer the question that they asked you. Don't go off explaining, right? A very typical example is, let's say you want to go study or you apply for an MBA, right? And they ask you why an MBA. You then start to give the history of poverty or the history of bad economic situations in your home country. I mean, no. You're doing that, and before you even get to when you answer the question about why exactly you want to get an MBA, the consular officer has told you to stop talking or they have had enough, right? You need to be very careful. Going off on a tangent is one common thing that happens when people are nervous or when they are answering questions. And so being able to articulate yourself in a few minutes or less helps you avoid that, right? So what do I need to know to pass my F1 visa? We've talked about a bona fide admission. We've talked about your funding. We've talked about proof of strong ties. We've talked about being able to place yourself at the center of the conversation as opposed to something that is tangential, right? When they ask you a question, your answer has no relationship to you at all, right? So those are key things to keep in mind. And the way you express and articulate yourself. Confidence, calm, being able to answer questions clearly, right? I know you're nervous. I know it. I know you're nervous, but you're going to have to be able to practice being able to speak even while being nervous, and speak clearly and speak calmly. All right, we'll talk about more things as we go on. Let me go to the next question. Canadian visas are really experiencing backlogs lately. That is correct. Anything we should know? Good question. So the backlogs have been a thing, especially since the pandemic. The pandemic actually made it worse. Canadian visa is different from the US visa because you're not actually appearing before someone. You fill out a form and submit, upload your document and have that be reviewed. And then based on their decision, they'll ask you to send your passport, right? And so the backlogs are something that has frustrated a lot of people. And I get that. And I'm really sorry. One of the things to keep in mind in dealing with backlogs is apply as soon as you can, right? As soon as you have your admission and you have all the documents you need, submit your application. Don't waste any time. Get yourself in the system as soon as possible. Another thing to do is to have an open communication with the school about this process, right? Apply as soon as possible. Identify a point of contact in school, someone who works with international students, and update them regularly, or update them as often as you can of what's going on. At the end of the day, you want to work hand in hand with this person, right? If it takes too long, that may be the person that goes ahead to either give you a new, offer letter, or give you a new admission letter, update things in the system, defer things as needed. But you need to have a point of contact in the school. Establish that point of contact that you can email and you get responses from them before you begin this process. The third thing is to ask schools about what their policy is regarding deferring admission or moving things a semester as needed. You want to clarify what those things are before you start pursuing your Canadian visa with that school. What do I mean by that? Let's say you get admitted to a school, or let's say you get admitted to 3 schools, right? For the sake of this case, you're admitted to 3 great schools in Canada, right? And you're trying to decide what your final choice is or who you want to pursue. Some people may have a very strict, if you don't come in the fall semester, you lose your spot. No excuses, no questions, right? While some other people may have if you can't make it for any reason, let us know. We're going to move it a semester. We're going to move it 2 semesters, and that's the max that we will do, right? Those policies are important, especially with the backlogs for Canadian visa currently, or Canadian study permit. Because if you go to a school that has a strict, if you don't show up at this time, you lose your spot, that would be very high stress, very frustrating, and it could send you really in a panic if the backlogs are eating into that deadline, whatever that deadline is, right? Versus a school who has a more flexible approach to this, and they have told you early that, if you're having an issue coming in at this time, we can extend this by a semester or extend this by 2 semesters. You want to go with that option in case the backlog affects you to the point that you're not able to go at the semester that you plan. So those are 2 main ways to deal with backlogs, or 3. Number 1, apply as soon as you can. As soon as you have your documents, as soon as you have things, submit your application. Don't wait for your best friend. Don't wait for your cousin. Don't wait for your best uncle. As soon as you have your documents ready and you have everything that you need to upload, go ahead and apply, right? The second thing is identify a point of contact in school, preferably someone who works with international students that could be your person to communicate with back and forth as you go through this process. Number 3, when possible, pick a school that has a flexible policy regarding deferring admission or regarding what semester to show up. Like, it's not strict that if you don't come at this time you're going to lose your spot, right? Those are 3 ways to deal with a backlog, but otherwise it's completely outside our control. You just have to submit your application, and whenever they get back to you, you travel. All right, next question. I'm going for an accelerated nursing program. Yay! I have a bachelor's and a PhD in nursing, with a BSc in microbiology. Will it be a problem for me? It shouldn't. The most important thing is, as soon as when you apply to the accelerated nursing program, did they accept you? If they accepted you, then you're good. And for people who are considering this option, what you need to do is send your bachelor's degree or your undergraduate transcript to an evaluating body like WES, right? They would be able to evaluate the courses that you've taken, and then send that to the accelerated nursing program and see if you meet their prerequisites. And if you do, they will or could accept you into their program. A lot of people have asked about this, and that's how to go about it. So once you submit your documents to the accelerated nursing program and they evaluate both your WES transcript makes it easier for them to say, okay, your biology in Kenya, right, is equivalent to the biology in the US, or your chemistry in Ghana is equivalent to chemistry in the US, right? So that way they can pick out the prerequisites and be able to judge whether you could be accepted into the accelerated BSN program. If you do all of that and you get in, then the question will be how to present yourself at the embassy, which is probably going to be something along the lines of, you study microbiology, you're passionate about healthcare, and you want to be a nurse, right? Or you want to go into nursing. This is what you have been doing in Nigeria or wherever you're from since you completed your bachelor's in microbiology, right? These are the ways you have started to venture into healthcare. And this accelerated program that is 2 years or 18 months, as the case may be, would help you get a bachelor's degree in a shorter time that can help you come do all the good that you want to do back home. So I hope I answered that question. If I didn't, please feel free to DM me and I can answer that question. Or I could clarify wherever you're having challenges. All right. I have a question in the chat that I missed. How can I ace my US visa after being denied 4 times? What will I put in place to convince the consulate? That's a very, 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 good question. 4 denials. So there are questions like right at the back of my head right now, right? What were you going for? What is your funding story? Your proof of strong ties? And at what point in all those interviews did they cut you off and deny you? So sometimes you can see a pattern, right? They ask you a question and after you answer that question, they just say no thank you, right? Some people notice as soon as they get to the funding part, it's a no-go, right? Or as soon as they get to the why they want to go study this, it's a no-go. There's some other factors that could influence denials like this, right? One is your story is not believable to the consular officer, right? I've seen this happen a few times where you are maybe an older student. When I say older, I'm talking about maybe your late 20s, early 30s, mid 30s, and you tell them that you're going for a bachelor's degree, right? That way, the question of strong ties and actually how you going at that point in your life to do this is not a way for you to immigrate into the country is questionable, right? People tend to be more successful for graduate degrees with that age range. So there's no age restriction to getting into programs in the US or Canada, but there's a caveat when you get to the embassy, because whatever case or story you're presenting to the consular officer has to be believable. And I have noticed or observed based on people's experiences that the older you are going for a bachelor's degree, the harder it is to convince them that it is not a scheme for you to immigrate. And so the question is, can you, if you are in a position where you're going for a bachelor's degree, is it possible for you to complete that program in your home country and then go for a graduate degree instead? That's probably something to explore. But otherwise, based on the things that we've been talking about, like it's more a question of what has your application look like in the past 4 times you sent it in, and how did your interview go. And you probably need to review that with someone to know what next to do. But yes, we do have consultations, and so if you send us a DM, we will be able to schedule something with you to talk about that. All right, I'm going back to see if I missed anything. I think I'm in the clear. Next question: how many questions a minute for a visa interview? That varies. There is no fixed number of questions. They don't tend to last on average more than about, I would say, 7 minutes. They are usually pretty short. This is for US visa interviews. And the number of questions they ask will probably be based on, what you already filled in on your application, maybe follow-up questions to some responses that you have been given, or maybe points they have already identified as things you need to clarify. So there's no one size fits all for that, right? It just depends on your unique situation, but on average they don't last up to 10 minutes at all. All right, next question: is an interview compulsory for a US visa, your first visa? Yes. Every now and then they open up Dropbox for renewal, for F1 visa renewal. So if you are already in the US, already a student, and you maybe want to go home to renew your visa, you might be able to do the Dropbox, depending on, they open it up, they close it, they open it up, they close it. So it just depends on what's available. And I am an advocate for renew your visa if you are, in good standing in school and all those other good things. I am a very strong advocate for that. And the reason for that is it helps, strengthen your claim of you want to go back home. and you actually have a relationship with your home country, you become a much more stable person that they can see you're in and out of the US, and you haven't, like, it's not a bad thing if you don't renew your visa. So let's not go off on a tangent. It's not a bad thing. Your I-20 is what's valid. But if you can renew your visa, go ahead and do that. It lets you travel. It also looks good on your profile if they see that you've been in and out of the US and you're able to maintain a relationship with your home country. So that's a good thing. But yes, it is compulsory for your first interview. Next question: how do I go about deferring my admission after getting my visa? Contact your school. So whoever your advisor is, or your designated school official, that's the office or the person who sent you the email about your I-20 or the international student office, you want to talk to both. So you want to talk to whoever the advisor of your program is, and you want to talk to the designated school official or someone in the international student office. So your advisor would give the approval for your program to be deferred, and the designated school official would reissue your I-20, so that when you are ready to come into the country, your I-20 actually shows a current program start date and not one from 6 months ago or 8 months ago. So the two people you need to talk to: your advisor for the program you got accepted to, and your designated school official, or whoever is the point person in the international student office. All right, I have another question. How can, assuming there's an I there, how can I link my previous program in BSc Mechanical Engineering to my MSc in Health Information Management during the interview? BSc in Mechanical Engineering to an MSc in Health Information Management. And so the question is, like, what did you put in your personal statement when you applied for a health information management course with an engineering background? So you're essentially presenting the same information, right? And so if, for example, the health information management is going to, and I am making an assumption here, I do not know this for sure, but let's say that it is going to involve maybe working with devices, right? For example, you can say that your interest in health is being able to create medical devices, and this particular program helps you harness your engineering background to, work with health information, or to work with, medical devices and health information. So it remember what I said at the beginning, it all boils down to your program, why you chose that program, and how you are at the center of it, right? And so what connects you to that program, or how did you present your background, when you were applying for that program? You're essentially telling a short version of that to the consular officer. So engineering does have a relationship to health, whether it's through, technology these days or medical devices. There are a plethora of things that connect engineering to health, right? What is unique about your program, and how can you actually articulate that as something that either drew you into that program, or something you want to do as a result of going to, study at that university or study with that program? Let me know if this answers your question. All right, so the next question here: I got a visa appointment date scheduled, but it's far, and I realize I need to get my visa sooner to resume by August, and I don't want to defer my admission. What should I do? Whoever sent in this question, have you applied for an emergency visa appointment? That's usually what you do in those situations. Now, I found out recently you can only apply for one emergency appointment per MRV fee payment. So MRV is machine readable visa. I think that's the meaning of MRV. However, you can only apply one time for an emergency visa appointment with each MRV payment, right? And so if you have already applied and it was either denied, or you have applied, you went to the embassy and they didn't give you the visa, you will have to pay again to be able to request another emergency appointment. So request an emergency appointment. If you have requested that and they still didn't give it to you, then you also may be able to contact the visa or the embassy directly. This actually works, and so go on whichever the US embassy for your country is. There's usually an email address or some kind of contact form for non-immigrant visas. Email that person or fill out the contact form, and they'll usually get back to you. They might tell you something generic that's already on the website, but if your case is unique enough, let's say it was an oversight, maybe somebody reviewed your emergency application but didn't respond in time, they can catch that from the back end and let you know. So don't be afraid to contact the embassy until you actually show up there. You're not being interviewed for your visa. So if you have any questions, you could call or email them. All right, next question. I have been issued my I-20 to a community college in the US, but I have read somewhere when you go to the embassy as for an F1 visa with an I-20 from a community college that you will be denied visa. Please, how true is that? I have actually seen cases where people get an F1 visa for a community college. I think it all boils down to why you're getting, or why you're applying for an F1 visa for a community college. Let me give you an example. If you tell them that you want to go study for an associate in biology or an associate degree in, nursing, however, you want to come back to your home country after you finish with your associate degree, the question is, why not a bachelor's, right? Or why don't you go directly into a bachelor's program? And so what happens with those community college I-20s at the end of the day is the actual case you're presenting to the consular officer and why exactly it's a good fit for you. A lot of people are not able to articulate exactly what they want to do with an associate's degree. An associate's degree is a kind of a step below a bachelor's degree. You usually need about 2 more years of education to get a bachelor's degree. And so if you're going to the embassy and you're saying you want to start out with an associate's degree because you want to go into this specialized program at a university that requires you to start with that or start at that level, plausible scenario. Or you're starting with an associate's degree so that you can gather enough credits to apply to this top school in engineering or top school in this. That's more plausible, right? And keep in mind, just like I mentioned something about age, your age actually plays a role in this. Unfortunately, this isn't a bias-free system, right? And so if let's say you're in your mid-20s, late 20s, early 30s, 40s, and you're going to get an associate's degree at the community college, it is a wonderful thing. There's nothing wrong with this. But being able to convince the consular officer that you want to go to school at that level and return back to your home country is a very hard thing to prove. And so there are other factors that play into the fact that community colleges, I-20, or if you go with a community college, we are more likely to get denied. But what I find, at least from my observation, is that the case you're presenting is more what is the problem or what is the concern, right? And so if you are someone who finished secondary school recently, you want to get an associate's degree, and people do this, right? Get an associate's degree, and then that associate's degree program has a relationship with a top university in that state. That happens a lot too, where once you finish your associate degree, automatically you get into 3rd year in that top university, right? Say that, just say it that way, that you want to go to this top school and get your bachelor's, and they have a bridge program with this community college. That's why you actually chose it. And the reason this is more important to you is because this university you're going to go to after your 2nd year, right, has XYZ that is specific to what you want to accomplish when you get there. All right, I hope I answered that question. If you have any clarifying questions, please ask me. Okay, I have one more that just popped in. If the embassy has not responded to your emergency appointment request for 2 weeks, can you email them? Yes, go ahead and email them, but make sure it is an emergency appointment for a brand new MRV fee and not one that they have denied you before or denied your emergency request before and you're still applying. You can only apply for 1 emergency appointment date per MRV fee. But yes, if you haven't heard from them, please go ahead and contact them. Next question. I'm seeing all the love you're sending me and I'm appreciating it. Thank you so much. But please feel free to jump in and ask me questions. I want to hear your thoughts too. Okay, I have been issued. Okay, I just answered that one. All right, so we're done with part A. The next set of questions are from people who have experienced a previous visa denial And I want to start by saying, I know how this feels. I got my first US visa my third time. So I got it on the third time. And so, like, I know what visa denials feel like. I wasn't one of those, first time you go to the embassy is the first time you get it, right? And so I know what it feels like to get ready, walk into the embassy, and still get told a no. Even when your story is true and, you have strong ties. My second visa denial, I had a full scholarship. I had a full scholarship to the school I was going to, like everything was fully covered. And so I've been in that boat, and I understand how frustrating and sometimes very confusing that, like, what that can feel like. And I want to let you know that as long as, and I should have said this, but I want to point that out, please avoid lying or telling confusing stories on your visa application, right? If you've been to the embassy 4 times, they have a record of those 4 applications. If they start to see discrepancies in the things you're saying and how you're saying it, you are already putting yourself in a black hole or in a black box, right? Things like exaggerating information, making up stories that you can't back up, right? Creating credentials that you don't have just so that you can make yourself look good. It doesn't matter the person that that it has worked for. Those things have a way of doing more damage than good. And so please, when you prepare your visa application online, right, assume that you may not get that visa the first time, and know that whatever you put on that first application, you have to be consistent with it. Even if it takes you 5 times to get that US visa, whatever you put down, you have to be consistent. And so you're better off saying the truth about your situation, or the truth about what you're going to do, or the truth about who you are or what you have. Now, there are certain kinds of information that can change over time as needed, right? Number 1, your salary. You were earning XYZ amount before, but now you've gotten a raise, right? You can update that. If it comes up in an interview, you say, oh, the last time I applied, I was being paid this. Between that period and now, I have gotten a raise, right? You can update that information. There's a clear, plausible explanation for that, right? What you cannot change is you're working in an oil company from 2006 to 2011. And then the next time you submit your application, the same 2006 to 2011, you are now working in a bank and your salary has multiplied times 10, right? Those things are very clear lies, right? Another thing is, they are smart people. If you're working at a place and you say you're earning 150,000 naira, I'm using Nigeria as an example because that's what I'm familiar with, but this applies to you regardless of what your home country is. You're earning 150,000 naira a month, right? If you tell them you've been working for 2 years at that job, and then you are the one that is funding yourself for a tuition of $30,000 a year, the math does not add up. So little things like that you want to be double checking to make sure that what you're putting and what you're stating, it's plausible and it's true. I am a very strong advocate for being honest on this application. I really am. I know you might hear a lot of things online on Twitter, and I'm a very strong advocate for being honest, because the truth is, if you're honest about your situation and you really do not qualify for a visa at that time, if that situation changes, you can actually explain that situation changed versus you were lying the last time, now you're telling the truth, or you told the truth the last time, now you're lying, right? Keep in mind. And another thing I want to point out is your visa application is not the end of it, right? If you come to the US or you come to Canada, wherever you go, and you want to pursue legal immigration, those things you filled out will still come into play, right? And so if you say you were single then, and all of a sudden you've been married for 10 years, those discrepancies can go in the front and affect maybe your green card application and other things. So please be cognizant of information. We are in an age where information is easily retrievable, or information can be easily compared to each other, and you want to be as truthful and as honest as possible, especially when you have to return to the embassy multiple times before you get your visa. All right, I'm done with that, public service announcement. Let's continue. So the first question under this segment: I got denied an F1 visa today. I'm really sorry. Like I said, I know how painful that can be, and I want to reapply. That's good. However, I do not want to seem desperate, but school starts in August. How can I make it right? Apply as soon as you can. If you see a date, or if you purchase another MRV and you can apply, go ahead and apply. What's important though is the question: how has your application changed, or what has changed from the last time you came to the embassy till now? That's a very important question that you have to think carefully about the answers to, right? And so, for example, there was actually a client that I worked with that went to the embassy, in that short period. But in that short period, their funding had significantly changed. They went from zero scholarship to a significant amount of money, or their whoever was going to fund their education actually put that money into their account, and so they could show, this person has actually put the money in my account for this education, right? And so when they ask you what has changed, you can say, the last time I was here, there was some lack of clarity in the way I described my funding. Now I have additional scholarship, or now whoever was going to sponsor me has paid this money to the school, or has paid this money into an account, right? And so what's more important is how your application has changed in that period, not necessarily the fact that you went back a week later or 2 weeks later. Can you articulate what's different in your application? If you can, then go back as soon as you can. It is not an issue at all. And seeming desperate is more in the way you present yourself, not necessarily how close you apply for your visa. Because remember, if you're speaking calmly, you're articulating yourself well, you have a bona fide admission, your funding story is solid, and you have proof of strong ties to your home country, then whether you go back a week or 2 weeks later, that's not going to change anything. Sometimes it could just be that you're not able to articulate yourself properly. I can't tell you how many times this has happened. What has changed? The last time I was here, I wasn't able to articulate my strong ties clearly. I wasn't able to articulate this clearly. But now I'm here to say without a doubt that I have this going on for me in my home country, and I will be able to come back and continue this once I'm done with school, right? Sometimes even clearly stating that makes a difference. All right. So please apply and let us know how it goes. We are rooting for you. All right. How to explain previous denial if you're changing the visa category from tourist to student. First question: how long ago was the tourist visa application? It's not a bad thing, but you want to make sure that you didn't go from I'm going to attend the conference at the beginning of May to at the middle of May I'm now going to school, right? And so maybe that time difference might be something to consider. It's not the end or be all, something to consider. But previous denial is you are going for a tourist visa. Maybe you are not able to articulate your strong ties to your home country, or you can say, sometimes you're not sure exactly why you were denied. You can say maybe something like, I perceive, or I am guessing that I was not able to articulate my strong ties to my home country. But right now I am going to school, and these are the supporting things to show that I'm actually going to school and I have enough going on for me in my home country to be able to return to. Whether that's a job, whether that's an existing career, whether that's a relationship with an organization that you have already formed and they are willing to consider hiring you when you get back, those are some things you can talk about. But just explaining, a lot of times, honestly, the majority of people who get denied for tourist visas is because their strong ties to their home country is not quite solid. And so sometimes you don't know, but if you do know, or you want to guess, you can just say, I perceive, or my guess is I wasn't able to clearly state this, right? But now I'm going to school, I have additional information to show that I do have strong ties to my home country, and my admission and my funding, they are valid as evidenced by XYZ. All right. Next question. Since I can't renew my study visa within the US, what do you suggest I do when my visa expires and I hope to further in another school or work in the US? The first thing is, you don't actually have to renew your visa. I advocate for renewing visa because, number one, you're not stuck in the US. You can go in and out, visit your family, attend conferences, go for a fun trip, and come back into the country without any issues, right? So that's one of the reasons I advocate for that. And also, if you ever have to go to the embassy in the future, like the fact that you've been home a few times and back, right, shows that you don't need to, like the case for strong ties, like you've already made it, right? Especially if you, let's say you finish a bachelor's, go home, spend like a year or two, and you're coming back to do a graduate degree. You know, your history with the US and back and forth will be important. However, with that being said, sometimes renewing your visa is a luxury a lot of people cannot afford. The flight ticket, staying, you know, if you're going to do it in Canada, staying in a hotel, staying in an Airbnb for X number of days, if you're going to go home to your family, you know, just that process, it's something that a lot of people realistically cannot afford to do, or honestly just don't want to do, right? And that's okay. Your I-20 is your actual document in the US that puts you or keeps you in status, right? So if you have an I-20 that expires December 20th, 2022, that's the day your status in the US also expires, except you apply for OPT within 60 days after that day, right? And so you can, without renewing your visa even once, go from bachelor's to PhD or doctoral while being in the US, as long as your I-20 or your service record never expires. And so you make the transition from either one school to the other before the I-20 expires, or you make the transition from one program to another before your OPT expires. You never want to be out of status. If you're out of status for even one day, the school will require you to leave the country and come back in. They won't let you start just by transferring your service record from one school to the other, because once you're out of status, that record ends. The school would have to issue you a new service number, and for a new service number you have to leave the country and come back in. Let me say that again. If you want to stay in the US without renewing your visa, make sure your service record never expires and you never go out of status. That is the only way you can transition from one program to another, or from one program to OPT to another program to another, without having to leave the country. If you're out of status for even one day, it makes the process a lot more challenging. You will be required to leave the country to start a new program. And I'm assuming that's what you're trying to avoid. So please make sure you never go out of status or your service record never elapses. It doesn't mean that it's the end of the world if that happens to you, right? And so if your OPT card ends, or your OPT ends, or your I-20 ends, leave the country as soon as you can, right? Very important. A lot of people are afraid to, but please leave the country as soon as you can, because when you do that, you do not, like, you don't incur, you know, a period or a number of days where you were out of status in the US. You take yourself out of, you know, just long story to tell at the embassy when next you're back, and it makes it easy for you to get a new F1 visa or come back into the country. So leave as soon as your I-20 expires and you're not on OPT, or you don't have a pending OPT application, or if your OPT was denied, right, you want to leave, you can appeal that. Let's not go off on a tangent. You can appeal that, but this is where you need to be talking to a lawyer, just so that you don't accrue unlawful days, because that could complicate your status in the US. So I have come to the end of the questions you sent me. Thank you to everyone who's been here, but I'm not leaving yet. Talk back to me. What are your thoughts? Does anybody want to jump on with me and chat about this process? Do you have any additional question? Is there something I said that wasn't quite clear? Something I should touch on again? Maybe I went off on a rant and you actually missed what the meat of what I was saying was. Let me know, and I'll be happy to answer. Until I come your way again, I'm your girl Winnie, and this is Winnie Student World, and I'll talk to you all again very soon.